Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s, your retro time machine back to my favorite time period, the 90s. And this week is, I don't want to say a special episode like I play anything for it, it's the 50th episode, as you can see in the title, obviously. I just want to thank everybody real quickly for anybody that's watched it or listened to it on Spotify. If you do that, I've had a lot of fun doing this. It was just some kind of spur of the moment idea I got top of my head, like maybe I should make a podcast talking about the 90s. And for a lot of times you have ideas in your head and you're just like, nah, and then it goes and you don't think about it anymore. But this one, it really stuck with me, and like the next day I started planning for it. I didn't know what kind of shape it would take other than just talking about the 90s. And then I was like, well, maybe I should do it by year, but then I was like, that'll be too much to talk about one time. Maybe like a month of the 90s. And then even then I didn't know like if I would just do an order, start January 1990 and go on. But I got the idea to do it like kind of randomly, so that way people didn't get like bored of like staying in the same time period. Be able to jump around in case for some reason this didn't take off, or I didn't want to film anymore, or ran out of things, or just it was too much time consuming. By the way, you see that thing? There's a spider. It is Halloween here in real time. Spider leg was hanging down, trying to get in the shot. But anyway, like I said, I chose to randomly jump around through the years of the 90s and the months, and I've been sticking with it for 50 episodes now. So I definitely plan on finishing it. But if you never know how life is, it could be over tomorrow. So at least I'll have these 50. Well, I have 49. I ain't finished this one yet. I can't say for sure I got 50 yet. But anyway, seriously, and I know these don't get a ton of views and everything, and maybe later on it will. And I don't know why I do it other than just it's cool to talk about this stuff. Maybe I can look on it in 20 years when I'm old and senile and can't remember things, and I can remember everything I did and everything that was going on in the world. I don't spend a lot of time on here on like news and politics and stuff like that. I'm not one of them channels. Pop culture stuff I was interested in. And if it interests you guys, that's great. If not, sorry, and this isn't the podcast for you. But anyway, all that to say, we're going back to in episode number 50. We're going back to February of 1995. I was 11 years old and in 5th grade. So let's go.
Viewer warning. The following program contains material that may be too intense for some viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and morning yawns. Play kickball in the street, man, those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
I do want to mention before we get into the actual podcast, I do have a bonus episode coming out. It is Thursday, October 30th, the day before Halloween. It's my top 10 favorite horror anthology movies and top 10 favorite horror anthology shows. And I really love the anthology format together, but especially horror anthology. It's probably my favorite subgenre, if you want to call it that, of a movie genre. But those are my personal ones, and I'll be giving, for the episodes, I'll be giving a couple examples of my favorite ones. I'm not going in-depth detail, on that one. And then for, again, it's my own countdown. When I make these, they're my own personal lists. I don't go based off of what everybody else thinks. That's for you guys to do. Seriously, you guys perfectly capable. Even if you just shoot it on your phone, you don't have to have a setup or anything. Just shoot a video on your phone, your favorite, blah blah blah, and there's people out there that'll watch it, and if not, at least you've done it. But anyway, we're gonna go back, like I said, February of 1995. I was 11 years old at this time and in 5th grade, acting out in school like an idiot as always. But there's just something special about the 90s, a lot of things special. And by the way, I don't look at the 90s in complete rose-colored glasses like everything was great then, nothing was wrong, because obviously there was things wrong. And as I've done, I've learned so much from doing research. Just see, when I get to the TV portion, I learned something about the TV show Ghostwriter that probably not a lot of people know unless they'd looked up a recent interview or something. But I've learned so much about this time period, and the good and the bad. So, but everybody looks at their particular time period they were teenagers or children in real fondly, unless they didn't have a good childhood. And there was a lot of parts of my childhood that weren't good, but I still found like the humor and the good things in them, because there's no sense in dwelling in bad things that happened in the past. You either got to move past it, or make a joke about it, or get some kind of therapy or something, because you can't just sit there and and I'm not, I'm obviously, there's been a lot of bad stuff that happened worse to other people than me, so I'm not saying get over it, not anything like that. Just you gotta find your own way to deal with it, so it don't control your life. I haven't let stuff that child abuse and stuff like that control my life. At least I try not to. Like I said, the stories come out on here, but anyway, there's something special about Saturday mornings back then. They cared more, as you can see now. They really don't give a crap, the network TV, about cartoons, because people aren't really watching network TV. The TV is it's hard to understand, or not to understand, but hard to explain to someone. Like, I always do these podcasts not just with my generation in mind, but older generations, but also younger generations. It's like, it's hard to explain to like today's, I don't know, I was 11 years old, so say an 11-year-old's watching it, because 11-year-olds can watch YouTube. Back then they didn't have such thing as YouTube. It's hard to completely like explain to someone that young the difference in just the way you consume media back then as compared to now. Nowadays you got streaming. There's still people with cable. I'm not saying cable's gone, but there's that. But there's a lot less watching that, and and I'm sure that in houses that don't have can't afford internet or devices and stuff, they're still watching over antenna, which I wish I could hear. We're so far from any stations, my antenna don't work on anything. But anyway, that's another, care about that. But yeah, just there was, we watched stuff, local channels then, if you didn't have cable. And a lot of times in my house, we went a lot of time without cable. But if you had local channels, you had a whole bunch of stuff. And of course, at the time, it's never enough. But nowadays, looking back at that, you're like, you only had that many channels. But it's crazy to think, But like I said, sorry, getting off track there. When you look back at that time period and just the Saturday morning cartoons they put out for kids, it was originally just NBC, ABC, and CBS, and of course Fox came along with Fox Kids, and they got into it. And then towards the end of the 90s, you get the WB, and we're going to look later on at some Saturday morning cartoons and Nickelodeon lineup. But it's just the amount of the great cartoons they had, and not just the 90s, back in the 80s too, and further back too. But it seemed like the 90s was just like, they put so much effort. And of course, we all know what it is. They're selling, commercials is the main goal of the cartoons. The cartoon is just there to keep the kids interested to watch the commercials. And then we want this, buy me this cereal, buy me this toy. We know that now. But as kids, we didn't care about that. We'll watch the commercials and stuff, and then, come on, get back to the show. Although it's funny now, I find myself watching tons of commercials from back then, even more than just the TV shows from back then, just to bring back that nostalgia of those things that I wanted to get by quickly so I can get back to my show. But yeah, there was just so many great, and I've done a bonus episode, my top 50 Saturday morning cartoons, and my top 50 Nickelodeon shows. They kind of go hand in hand. But yeah, it was just, even then when things were starting to get bad for me at home, then there were still a lot of good times. We'd either eat cereal while we watched the cartoons, which of course was a different experience back then too. And I'm not talking about the flavors and stuff of cereals. Obviously they have a ton more flavors now. That's what I like about today's time period. Like right now, I'm literally drinking dragon fruit Mountain Dew from, I think you can only get this at Walmart. What they have back then, I don't even think, they might have had Code Red, or that might have came in later. I can't remember when that came in. Of course, I remember when Surge came in, the greatest of all time. But yeah, that's what I like about now, is the amount of flavors. But back then, it wasn't really the flavors of the cereals and stuff that's better, but just the experience. Like, You ever sit there at the, if you're eating at the kitchen table and not watching cartoons, you ever sit there and read the cereal box? Like, there was a lot of stuff besides, the information. If you read everything on it, you go to the nutrition information and the stuff on the side about the guarantee, if you don't like it, we'll give you your money back, that thing. But just the stuff on the back of the box. They would sometimes have games where you cut it out when you were done, or if you were smart, you took the bag of cereal out of it and then used the box. Like a little board game. You make your own pieces, and if everybody seemed to have dice laying around then, or even flip a coin, and you move around the board. Or there's a maze, there's puzzles, there was fun stuff to read, trivia, word jumbles, just all kinds of stuff in there. And not only that, but inside, a lot of times these cereals had prizes inside. There wasn't no code for, scan this code, do this QR stuff. A lot of time there would be prizes. And now there would be also times where there would be big prizes where you'd have to like send in 4 or 5, proof of purchases they call it, which was the barcode, from the cereal to claim a prize, which not a lot of us did unless you had parents that would buy you stamps and stuff and send that in. But those prizes on there, just like with the 20 ounces of pop, as we call it in Cincinnati. That's what we call it around there, pop. We call soda pop. But a lot of win a free 20 ounce or buy one get one free, or especially when they were doing, you remember Ploids with Doritos? We called them chip points. They were Ploids, but we called them chip points. We were all saving for a trampoline, like one of the biggest prizes. We had a ton, but I told the story last week when we left Marky Foe laying there in the driveway. We left, but the end part of that is we had to give the car back because it was his dad's car who had died. So he technically owned the car, so we had to give the car back. I mean, Steve had a car anyway, so it wasn't like we didn't have a car. But my mom gave the car back, and we didn't get our chip points out of it. Or we would have had a trampoline for sure. But anyway, just that kind of stuff, the experiences with cereal. And then when we weren't eating cereal, we were going to, because I would always go up to the store, UDF, my favorite store ever. If you don't know, it's a Cincinnati thing, United Dairy Farmers. Started by Carl Linder, who, at the time, one of the richest men in the world. He was right there from Norwood, Ohio, where I was growing up at this time. Super great guy. He had there's a park called Linder Park we always went to on field trips. He owned the Reds for a short period of time. But anyway, UDF was our favorite store, and it was right, a couple blocks away. I'd go up there and get Marky Foe newspaper on Saturday and Sunday mornings. And, if we didn't have cereal, or sometimes a special treat, I get to pick out stuff. And my first choice would always be cherry sweet rolls. Do you guys remember those? It was Hostess. I might be wrong. It was either Hostess or Dolly Madison that made the cherry sweet rolls. Cannot find those anymore. They don't make them anymore. They make the cinnamon rolls, they were always my second choice. They're good, but nowhere near as good as those cherry sweet rolls. Closest thing I found is Walmart has a strawberry version of them, and they're pretty good too, but nothing like these. But if they didn't have those, we would get some kind of snack cakes, like, of course, sorry, my throat's going on me there, thinking about the snack cakes. Zebra cakes, Christmas time there'd be the Christmas tree cakes, and just the Little Debbie's type snacks, that everybody loves now. That would be our go-to breakfast if they didn't have the rolls. But then after the cartoons and the eating was over, it would be time for chores for me. Because Marky Foe would be home on the weekend until he went to the bar. We always loved when he went to the bar, because it's like, yeah, free day, we can do what we want. But I mean, I had to do so much. I had to do dishes. I remember there's nights I'm doing laundry till 3 or 4 in the morning. And of course I would goof around a lot of this, and I could have got it done quicker, but it was like chores back then, I don't know about other people. Other people probably had regular chores and got paid an allowance for it. Not me. My allowance was I was allowed to live. But anyway, but besides that, like I said, and with the rest of the day, if Marky Foe was there, sometimes it depends on his mood. If he was okay mood, then we could watch TV. Of course, it was whatever he was watching. Later on, we'd have a playroom upstairs. We have a little bit more freedom. But for the most part, it was, and we were never allowed to go to anybody's house besides the neighbors. So, but just, I love that Saturday morning feel. Like I don't think I could ever experience that again, no matter what I tried to do here in this time period. That's why it's fun to go back and do this. You know, you relive it, and then you kind of get that melancholy feeling like I can't go back to that. You know, why am I talking about this? It was such a. But then you remember it wasn't. You know, not everything about it was good. So it's like you look at the past, you move on to the future. Or unless you're like me, you talk about the past for 5 hours. Sorry, I've been going on for about 15 minutes about cereal and Saturday mornings. I'm going to talk a little bit about wrestling at this time. No WWF news at the note. Of course, this was 1995, so wrestling on a whole was on a down period. ECW was making strides, but wrestling as a whole was kind of going down, especially WWF. But there was a couple ECW supercards, and I've explained that in the past. They weren't on pay-per-view. They were just like their big events. They would like give a name to it, and then they would take those matches from that and spread it over a few weeks of TV. So they would not only get a big crowd and have a big event, but they would also have their be able to film their TV. Unlike today, when TV is you watch Raw's on, it's Raw. It's not filmed off of this other stuff. But the first of those was ECW Double Tables. It was a super card from the ECW arena, which a lot of them were from, not everyone, but a lot of them were from there. That was their home arena. This was February 4th. Of course, Joey Styles, the commentator, he did all those ECW shows by himself, and it never got boring. It never got you never felt like you were missing a commentator. Later on they'd add other commentators and stuff, but just Joey Styles on the microphone was just pure gold. Like I said, these episodes this event went out over 3 episodes over the month of February, and this is actually part of an internet wrestling convention in the area. I don't know if it was the first ever one, but obviously these were new then, 1995. Internet was, AOL dial-up. Not everybody had it. We certainly didn't have it. But there was an internet wrestling convention, and this event was actually part of it. And the show was named after the main event. On the show, Chris Benoit defeated Al Snow. The main event saw Sabu and the Tasmaniac, which of course would be Taz later on, with Paul E. Dangerously, Paul Heyman, the booker of the company, eventual owner of it. I don't know if he owned it at this time or not. I can't remember. But they defeated ECW Tag Team Champions, the Public Enemy, in a double tables match. And this is a match where eliminations occurred when you throw someone through a table. So that's why it was double tables. You had to put both members of the team through a table to win. So we got new champions there. Then we move on to WCW Super Brawl 5 from Baltimore, Maryland. This was February 19th. Alex Wright defeated Paul Roma. I know you're like, oh, who cares about that? Well, the match is actually significant because Paul Roma actually would get fired next month because of what happened in this match. Obviously, Alex Wright still won, but he was supposed to win with his finisher, and Paul Roma kicked out at the last second. And he said later on he did it on purpose because, in his words, they were going to push him like Hulk Hogan, and he didn't think he deserved it. First of all, they weren't going to... I don't care what you say about Alex Wright. He was not going to get the Hulk Hogan main event push, okay? Like Hulk Hogan or... I can't even say Macho Man or Ric Flair because Hulk Hogan was and WCW with his guaranteed contract was above everybody else as far as what they did with him. So there's no way he was even going to get close to that. And he was an okay wrestler. He was one of my favorites from that time period just because he was memorable, but not he wasn't anything extraordinary. And of course he never got anywhere near the main event scene. But that's one thing. But two, you're Paul freaking Roma, known as the world's worst 4 Horsemen member of all time. And, I'm not going to do this. No wonder you got fired and no one's seen you after that. I don't know if he was ever in any other company, but hopefully not, because he was trash. But WCW World Champion in the main event, Hulk Hogan, speaking of him, with Jimmy Hart, defeated Big Van Vader by disqualification when Ric Flair interfered and helped Vader. And this is a time period where Hogan came in and retired Ric Flair, but then Ric Flair had to keep coming back because Hogan needed somebody. He didn't want to work with Vader, which I know people had problems with him because of how stiff he was. But Hogan is just, if you don't want to work with someone, it don't work for me, brother. You know his thing. Yes, I know he's dead. No, it doesn't take away the thoughts. That's one thing that annoys me. When someone dies, people are like, oh, all those bad things they did in their life, they're gone. I'm not saying you have to dwell on them, but like, I'm not gonna sit here and say like, oh, Hogan was a team player. He never used his creative control. He always did what was best for business. No, he didn't. This is he did. Don't change that. Anyway, that's my little getting off track there. This wasn't one of WCW's best pay-per-views, but not anything like 2000's WCW. Don't get me wrong there. And then the final wrestling supercard for ECW of the month was called Return of the Funker. February 25th from the ECW arena. Again, 3 episodes of Hardcore TV came out of this. The event obviously named after Terry Funk, who was returning on this show. ECW Heavyweight Champion Shane Douglas retained his title, defeating Marty Jannetty, which I don't even remember Marty Jannetty was in ECW. Of course, this was during Shane Douglas's first run there. He would leave shortly after this for WWF and became Dean Douglas and that whole debacle, and then of course would go back to ECW. But this was after he'd thrown down the NWA World title and declared himself ECW World Heavyweight Champion. The Triple Threat, which he was one of the members of, but the other 2 members, which I don't even remember this until I was doing research, and I was like, oh yeah, because I wasn't watching ECW at this time. I didn't start watching ECW, even know about it until I want to say 6th or 7th grade, when I was in middle school, when a friend literally brought an audio tape. Like, it wasn't even video, an audio tape of some of the promos, and just from hearing the promos, it made me want to watch the show. And I didn't even know it was on TV, because it was on like 2 in the morning on Channel 25, which, had trouble coming in our TV anyway. But the Triple Threat, Dean Malenko and Chris Benoit, like I said, the Triple Threat I remember the most was Shane Douglas, Bam Bam Bigelow, and Chris Candido, but that was later on. But anyway, they defeated the ECW Tag Team Champions that had won the titles at that previous supercard I was talking about, Sabu and the Tasmaniac. The main event was Cactus Jack versus a mystery opponent. And at this time, he was feuding with Woman, who was like managing the Sandman. And the mystery opponent turned out to be someone named DC Drake, which I had to look up. Apparently, he's like a journeyman wrestler, like not very well known. But, the crowd was definitely disappointed in it. It was all to set up, the stuff that happened after that. Because a lot of ECW stuff, I love them, but a lot of it was, just chaos and stuff. And sometimes the matches didn't even seem to matter. It was just all the violence and stuff, But, Cactus Jack beat him about 4 minutes. And then Terry Funk returned, and him and the Sandman proceeded to take the Singapore cane and beat Cactus Jack about 47 times with the thing. Of course, if you don't know what a Singapore cane is, it's sign of the times. I can't remember when that was. I'm sure, I don't think I've covered it yet, or when it came up in the news I would have looked up. But if everybody remembers, I can't remember the guy's name. I'll remember it next time, or if you remember, put it in the comments. The American who was over in Singapore, and I can't remember what crime he did. It was either stealing or something. But the punishment there was getting hit with a Singapore cane, which, today's wrestling fans, it's a kendo stick. But, but ECW, they were always, on the edge of pop culture, trying to bring that in. Like what they did with the Public Enemy, they would basically have a music video, having music playing the whole time during their match, just like they did later on with New Jack. Was it Timothy McVeigh? I think his name was Timothy McVeigh. That, or I'm confusing him with the Unabomber or the Oklahoma City Bomber. I am off here. I'm gonna look that up because I feel like an idiot. Singapore cane. Michael Fay. Well, then who the hell's Timothy McVeigh? Yeah, he was the Oklahoma City Bomber. And I'm not trying to make jokes out of this stuff. It's just, like, I got all these names in my head. Michael Fay, McVeigh, there. That's how I got it wrong. Anyway, that was such a big deal here that would happen to an American. So they started using that as a gimmick in ECW when the Sandman was a really big heel at the time. Everybody remembers him as, the good guy that everybody cheered, came out of the crowd and stuff. But this time he was, like, bad as bad can be, like Raven levels of bad in ECW. But yeah, he was using the Singapore cane because it was just the controversy of it. Sorry about that little mess up of history there. And the Unabomber was Ted Kaczynski, I know. I got those right. Anyway, one final note about wrestling, kind of a sad note. Eddie Gilbert, speaking of ECW, hot stuff. Eddie Gilbert died at 33 years old from a heart attack. He was the first booker of ECW once it, I think it was like Tri-State Wrestling or something, and they renamed themselves Eastern Championship Wrestling before Extreme Championship Wrestling. But Eddie Gilbert was like the first booker, and then when he left in like 3, Paul Heyman took over. But yeah, he was the first booker of ECW, and obviously, family lineage in wrestling, definitely died way too soon. I'm going to talk about a book now. Goosebumps, of course, we were definitely reading these at this time. They'd exploded. In fact, it was Carlos is here. He jumped up here. Say hi, Carlos. Are you the dog in the Goosebumps intro? Anyway, the Goosebumps had gotten so popular, released by Scholastic, that the fall of this year was when Goosebumps the series was starting. But the book they put out this month was number 28, one of my favorite books of all time, The Cuckoo Clock of Doom. Anybody remember this book or the episode or both? It's that tale about finding the cuckoo clock, and the dad finds the cuckoo clock, and it's an antique clock, and brings it in, and the kid turns the head around, and it makes him start going backwards in time, and he eventually gets to a baby and has to try to turn the head back in time at the store where it was originally sold. Just one of my favorite Goosebumps of all time, and they did a really good job with the TV version of this. I can't remember what season it came out for that one, but like I said, the series hadn't even started yet. It was just a book at this time, but a lot of people probably, a lot of parents probably didn't like those books. Oh, it's scary, it's not, it doesn't have a literature value or whatever. But I got a lot of kids that didn't want to read to start reading, and it there's nothing inappropriate in Goosebump books anyway. They try to get scary stories to tell in the dark banned, which is bull crap. But Goosebumps, besides some scary monsters and pictures and stuff, there was nothing in it bad. There was no bad words. Nobody even literally, they don't even say anybody dies in them. They may allude to it, or people go missing or something, but nothing like that. But it's just amazing throughout time period, what people consider controversial or not controversial. Like, one time Goosebumps was controversial. Now if you read it, it's, compared to some of the stuff they have, it's the tamest stuff you can think of. But Carlos is still on me. Now the other dogs are getting jealous. There's Chili. Go see Chili. But talk a little bit about music. The Billboard Hot 100 at the time, which of course ranks the top 100 songs each week. The song Creep by TLC, which I actually know, I learned later on. I wasn't listening to pop music at all this time, but I've later since heard that song like a million times. It was number 1 for 3 weeks, plus 1 week back in January to make 4 weeks total. And then, I don't remember hearing this song, but obviously I know the artist. Take a Bow by Madonna was number 1 for 1 week, and then number 1 for all of March and half of April, so it's 7 weeks total. Of course, Billboard pop charts are notorious for multi-week number 1s. My favorite, you already know, but if you watch this 50 times, I don't know if anybody's watched all the episodes, but I talk about it once a week. My favorite music is country music, especially 80s and 90s. So I was listening to American Country Countdown. Speaking of Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings, I'd go up there and get the newspaper early so I can come back and listen to the countdown. It would be on it from 9 to noon with the host Bob Kingsley. I still remember his voice. It was like so comforting, just laying there listening to music and him, coming on in between every other song or something. I love that whole time period. But the number 1 that was number 1 for 2 weeks, which I was really surprised, is Mi Vida Loca, My Crazy Life by Pam Tillis. Not one of my favorite songs of hers, or songs in general. I mean, it's not a bad song, but it's one that I probably would change the channel, if I had something else to change to. It's just not one of my favorites. I was surprised to find it was not only number one but for 2 weeks. But you know, obviously people liked it. The next song I really like was Colin Ray's "My Kind of Girl," kind of a rocking type country song. You know, a fast-paced, you know, really good song. And then number one for 1 week, and then another week the following month, so it makes 2 weeks total. If you can do math like me. Back when we had real math and not Common Core stuff. I won't get into that. Stop. If you know wrestling, Steiner math is easier to decipher than Common Core math. But anyway, was Old Enough to Know Better by Wade Hayes. He was a Canadian artist. He's not dead. But I remember the hook from that. Old enough to know better, but still too young to care. Of course, as kids, we're singing like, yeah, we're old enough. 11 years old. Yeah, I'm old enough to know better. Yeah, I'm old enough not to wet the bed. Basically, that's about all I'm old enough for. But anyway, there's a couple album releases. First one is a really big one, like a monumental album in the country world, and we'll spend a little bit of time on this. Will you stop whining down there? But Shania Twain's second album, a lot of people think of it as her first. It was really her first one that got popular, but The Woman in Me, that was the album that made her explode into like being a country superstar. The next one, Come On Over, would explode her into like pop superstar. But this was her. Most of the songs on it were written by her and her husband at the time, which she later divorced for him cheating on her. Mutt Lang, her producer, and then became her husband, like I said. They wrote most of the songs on it. This went to number one on the country charts, obviously, and it went to number 5 on the Billboard Top 200, which ranks all genre albums, and it's usually pop albums that are on that, but pretty impressive. It went to number 5. Number 19 for the year for all of Billboard, all genres. Number 2 for country, and it was only beaten by Garth Brooks' The Hits, which was his massive greatest hits album, the first one he had at the time. So, that was, a big deal there. It was only beat by that. It was so big, it was still charting next year. It went to number 6, the Billboard Top 200 for 1996, number 1 for the whole year the next year. It was also number 38 for all Billboard genre albums, and the 9th biggest selling country album of all time. Sold 12 million copies just in the US. I mean, this thing was literally still charting until 2002 up in Canada. It was still on the charts, and that's 7 years later. That's insane. It won pretty much every major award for albums except for the CMA Awards, which was leaned more towards traditional country earlier on. Now, of course, they got all this pop stuff on there everywhere. They can't stop it. Snuggles, quit. I just wrote down all these facts. Sorry, I keep looking over, but it's like, even more like bigger than all those is the fact that 8 singles were released from this album. That was completely unheard of. 4 is a big release, but 8, that's unheard of. And the fact that most of the songs were successful. The very first one was released was Whose Bed Have Your Boots Been Under? It only went to number 11, but the next one was really what put her out on the map. Any Man of Mine, it went to number 1. Quit Tails, and I still remember the video. I mean, it was like almost controversial at the time. She was doing the video in like this jean vest that showed her belly button, and that was like, oh my God, she's showing it. Like literally, it was like news on like country. Star Shania Twain shocking the country community by showing her belly, but like she's not naked, okay? But that was like, that shows how conservative country was at the time. But that video was like, all over. You would see it sometimes 2 or 3 times an hour if you're watching CMT or TNN. But next was The Woman in Me, which is the title track. It only went to number 14. Her ballads on this one didn't do nearly as well as they would do on the Come On Over album next. Like I said, only went to number 14. If You're Not in Love, I'm Out of Here went to number 1. That was a big song. The next one's my favorite Shania Twain song of all time, and my favorite video of all time. You Win My Love went to number 1. But her in this video, and she's like, I was 11 years old at the time. I was probably 12 when this video came out by the time, you know, it was released, 12 or 13. So obviously hormones there, but I mean, her in this race car, and I mean, the song itself is, like I said, it's my favorite, but the video, we'll just say teenage hormones there, and we'll just leave it at that. Definitely had a huge crush on Shania Twain. The next one is a really good song too. It went to number 1. No One Needs to Know. It was actually on the Twister soundtrack too, and it was in the, I think it was in the movie. I can't remember if it was in the movie or not, but they used clips from the movie in the video. It was a big song. Next one's another ballad that didn't do that great. Home Ain't Where His Heart Is Anymore, number 28 only. But still, if I could have a song in the chart in the top 9,000, I'd be happy. Anyway, the last song is that was released, it didn't chart, was called God Bless the Child. There's actually 2 versions. If you have the album, it's just her singing this a cappella, but the single release is really good. It had music. It was more an extended version of the song. Had a lot of controversial topics in it, so I can see why it didn't chart, but it was still an important song. One song that wasn't released, as if almost all of them weren't, that was really good, that I think could have been a good single, was called Raining on Our Love. It was a really good song, like I said. It was, I'm mentioning this now because I don't know when the actual song was released. It was a few months earlier, but I know the album came out with that freaking annoying song that you never can get out of your head by the, I think it was Swedish group or some foreign group. Sorry, I'm not trying to be like foreign people or anything. I think they were from Sweden. I could be wrong, completely wrong on it. But the group called Rednecks, which were used, it's kind of like today's country, where it country and rap and all this other stuff. But like, they were doing this in 1995. They released that song You Can't Get Out of Your Head, Cotton Eye Joe. And I always like to tell the story. My mom hates that song because she had her alarm set one morning. Of course, this is before, you know, set your alarm on your phone. This is, they had alarm clocks, and you either hit beep, 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 the tone, or you could wake up to the radio. Well, she had the radio set one day, and it went off, and blaring in her ear, like as fast as it goes, scared the crap out of her. And like the next 2 or 3 nights, at every time, or nights, morning, like 6 in the morning, that would go off. It would seem to come on, and she stopped using the clock radio, or she turned the channel, or something. But she never wanted to hear that song again. But one final album came out that was a good one. Was Trish Stratus. I'm not talking about wrestling. Trisha Yearwood, her 5th album, Thinking About You. It went to platinum and went to number 3 on the country charts. The singles released from it were X's and O's and American Girl. That was a great song. It went to number 1. The title track, Thinking About You, also went to number 1. You Can Sleep While I Drive, which I don't remember hearing at all, only went to number 23. Go Too Far, great song. It only went to number 9 though. I say only, but you know, you're thinking of music, you're thinking number 1s is the best. You know, if you go less than that, it's not good, which is not true. A lot of great songs have not even made the top 10, at least in my opinion. But the last song, called On a Bus to St. Cloud, it didn't chart, and I don't have any memory of that song. But that's a little bit about the albums released and music in general. Talk a little bit about food now. I always try to research food that may have come out, like fast food or otherwise. Sorry, I gotta get a drink. At the time, this time McDonald's had a promotion going on where, and I remember seeing a commercial for this a while ago, just watching a compilation of commercials, where you could get a 95-cent, either, depending on time of day, double cheeseburger or a sausage egg McMuffin for only 95 cents. Like they'd never do that these days. I don't even know what they cost now, but probably 4 times this. And Taco Bell released the double-decker taco, which they recently brought back as part of their decades thing, but it was released in 95. I'm not a fan of it because I don't like refried beans. I know, you don't like Taco Bell? No, I don't eat refried beans, so I don't eat the burritos. But yeah, it was basically a hard-shell taco inside a soft-shell taco, and the beans are kind of a glue. For me, they could just do that and put sour cream as the glue, because I freaking love sour cream on tacos. But anyway, those are some food things that came out then. And of course, we weren't eating out a whole lot then, but I remember going to Arby's a lot. The big thing was the 5 for $5. You could get 5 roast beefs or 5 beef and cheddars for like $1 a piece. That's crazy now. I remember when they went to 5 for $5.95, people were like, they raised it 95 cents. Now look at it now. I don't even, 5 for 15, 5 for 20. Arby's is, it's up there. But another thing I don't say thing, it's a person. I talked a few episodes ago about my grandma Lois. I dedicated the episode to her because it was the month that she died. Her husband, my grandpa Wally, which is my dad's dad, just in case you didn't know, he died in 2009, I believe. So obviously I won't be able to do a month where he died, because I'm not, unless I talk about the 2000s in the future after I do all the 90s. But I wanted to make, talk a little bit about him on this episode. I talked about him in various stories and stuff in the past, but kind of just focus on him right now, just because his birth month was February. He was born February 25th of 1923. So the year we're talking about now, 95, he would have turned 72 this year. It's crazy to think that if he were still alive, that he'd be 102 years old today. Like, wow. But he was a tail gunner in the Navy. He served in World War II. I know he's been shot down. He was shot down twice, I think. Later, he would go on. I don't know exactly, everything he did in his career, but I know he worked for Conrail, the train company. I think it's a company, the train line. I can't remember. I don't know exactly what he did on that. And I remember his last job he was like a courier. Back then, they don't have DoorDash and stuff now, but he would. And it wasn't even food. He would like deliver like important papers and documents and stuff like that. From I guess a business would call him, or I don't know if he worked for a certain company, but he would drive it to because this is before fax machines were huge and used by everybody, and emails were huge and used by everybody. You would send stuff by courier if you wanted to get there quickly. Didn't want to send it in the mail, take forever. But I know he did that. But like I said, we lost Grandma Lois in 1991, and not too long after that, I guess I don't know the exact reason they moved. In my mind, I'm thinking it's because all the memories he had was there at that. We had an apartment above the flower shop there in Price Hill, Ohio. Where I wasn't born. I was born in the hospital, but I was raised there until I was like 3 or 4. But we had my grandpa and grandma and Uncle Dan had the apartment above the flower shop, which was owned by whoever owned the building. And then there was an attic apartment where me and my mom and my dad stayed. Until they got divorced, and it was just my dad, and I would go to visit. But they lived there. I don't know how long they'd lived there. But like I said, I don't know if they moved because all the memories he had with her, or if it was something to do with the ownership of the place, or what. But anyway, they moved. He moved maybe less than a block away to this little apartment or house. It was like a house apartment, I think. He rented, and I remember visiting there a few times. Of course, this is after my mom and dad split up. And then later he would move a few blocks down in Price Hill to like a small apartment in this house. I had like all these different small apartments. They were just, it's hard to explain because they had their own bathrooms in each, so it wasn't like, everybody used the same bathroom. It was just a big house with different rooms. It had a kitchen, it had a small bathroom, it had literally a closet you open, and there's a shower in there. So, they'd obviously built this to rent out. At one point, my Uncle Dan was living in the attic apartment, and then when he died, which I'll be talking about him when he died in 1999 once I get to that month. And how he brought me back to my dad and my grandpa, basically. But yeah, that was where he moved in and lived until he would move out and move in with my Uncle Tim, and I'll get into that. But sorry, I'm going through all this technical stuff about where he lived here. Not trying to, I don't know. It's weird. It's hard to talk about him, but it's also not. Like, when I start talking about it, it makes me realize how much I miss him, and would love to, because me and him, like his favorite thing to do was film things. Big shock there. Wonder where I get it from. But he had one of those big cameras with the tape that literally, VHS tape that goes in it, set on your shoulders. But he would set it up on his tripod. His all metal tripod. I remember that thing. I would get yelled at so many times for touching it, but I understand why. But he would film everything. There were so many tapes, and they got stolen by various family members over the year. Well, I say family members, there's probably ones that I don't associate with, and probably their significant others too. I don't know who took them, so I can't really say. But I don't know how many still exist, but I know I've got 2 of them. One that was made for my other grandma, my mom's mom. It was a compilation of stuff from a tape, and then there was another one that I got that was still there at my grandpa's when I moved in with him around early 2000s when I moved in with him. But it was he had taped so many memories of all of us, and they just all seem to be gone except these few. And if you see these home movies on my Facebook or my YouTube, those are ripped off of the ripped off. I ripped them off. Took it off of the VHS and I made them digital, which is a long process, but it's rewarding just to have these things for me forever. Not just on YouTube, but just have digital files of them, so that way, if something ever does happen to those VHS tapes, which time's bound to do, I hopefully still have the digital copies of them everywhere. But he loved doing that, and he loved music. His favorite artist of all time was Engelbert Humperdinck. It just sounded like a random artist, but he loved that type of music, and he loved Frank Sinatra, and he loved Alabama. That was one of my favorite first memories, is listening to My Home's in Alabama, the album, which is Alabama's first main release album. They'd had a couple independent ones, but I would sit there on his lap, and he would just sing those songs to me, and I would learn them. And I remember that Engelbert Humperdinck, I told this story before, but his song "Please Release Me" is like one of my favorite songs of all time. But anyway, he got me loving him so much that my mom and dad wanted to watch like an Elvis concert or something. Obviously, it had been after Elvis had died, but it was just like a concert. It was I think it was on TV. It was like a TV special, because obviously they were still. They're still making movies and stuff about Elvis. But I didn't want to watch it. I was throwing a fit. I don't want to watch that. And my dad lied to me and said it was Engelbert Humperdinck. So I sat there the whole time enjoying it, thinking, because I didn't know any better. But that's my dad for you. I'll get to an episode about it, all about him too. Not exactly sure when it'll be, but I gotta brace myself for that one. But just so many great memories with Grandpa Wally. Like I said, my love of filming things, my love of music. He would just film me like 5 or 6, 7 years old, standing there singing Billy Joe Royal songs, playing this guitar, like playing and just strumming it and singing in my little kid voice. And later on, I wish the tape still existed, I produced my own concerts where I'd do like Garth Brooks songs. And I even made a little title thing at the end that said TNN, because I was pretending I was on a concert on TNN. I made it on a little piece of notebook paper and held it up to the screen like it was credits. I wish that tape still existed. That would be hilarious to see. But like I said, they were all taken. But anyway, trying not to get into negative stuff like that. But later on, I remember, like I said, I moved in with him around early 2000s. And, I literally lived in a closet, like laying out of a closet on this like bed I put down at night, and I was sitting there during the day with a chair, because it was the only space in there. There was the main room with his bed and then a recliner. Back then I couldn't sleep in a recliner, or he would have let me, obviously. Nowadays I sleep in a regular chair half the time anyway, so it's nothing to me today. But this thin little bed that I laid in, half sticking out of the kitchen, and this but it was great, because my mom and Steve, my stepdad, later on after Marky Foe, got me a TV, a small little 13-inch TV that I literally carried on the bus over there from Norwood to Price Hill. Luckily I didn't get robbed. But got digital cable hookup back there, and man, I was so happy. I could watch so many things and play my Sega Dreamcast back there, and I would record stuff on the DVR and then record them to VHS tapes. I had so many of those. But he loved watching Jay Leno, The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. He didn't really watch the guests all that much unless it was someone he wanted to see, or that he loved the animals. Oh, he loved the animals when they had the animal guests on. But he would watch the monologue at the beginning, and then the second segment, which was either one of Jay Leno's segments. Like, of course, Mondays it was always headlines. People would send in these headlines and it'd be funny, or there'd be funny products from the 99-cent store, or jaywalking when he'd go out and talk to people and get interviews, or different characters he would do. But he loved that. He loved watching Seinfeld, which I'd never seen before, but thanks to him I love Seinfeld. Sanford and Son, when my dad was living there off and on, he would, between there and Indiana, where I'd been living, when he was living with my sisters. But the funniest, I talked about this last week, The Planet's Funniest Animals, that show, he loved that. And then and of course, like any older person does, they love watching the news and ranting about it and everything else. And sometimes you would watch Jerry Springer during the day, and just like, he was just like so disgusted with these people, and he would get so mad, and he would start yelling at the TV. And if my dad was there, he'd be like, "Why do you watch this?" And they'd get into arguments over this. Like, "I don't know how to explain why I watch it. These people are stupid." Like, why are you watching these people? They're making you so mad. It's like, I don't know. But it was funny. And the last time I lived with him was like early 2004, and my Uncle Tim convinced him to go live with him, so I helped him move, and then I moved back in with my mom for the first time in about 5 years. I'd been going over there. I would sometimes go over there the weekends, because I'd stay there to help take care of Grandpa. But if he was doing okay, I would go. But if he was like having some health problems, obviously I wouldn't want to leave him. But it'd give me a break to get out and see my brothers again. But like I said, I didn't it wasn't like I didn't want to go to either one. I wanted to go to either one, but I felt like sometimes I felt like bad for leaving Grandpa, because I was afraid something was going to happen, and thank God nothing ever did. I remember one time, it was when I'd first started living there. I don't know if he hadn't checked his sugar right, or took too much insulin, or just was having some kind of health problem. But once a month, my Aunt Jan, which is my Grandma Lois's sister, would come and take me to the store. It would be both of us at first, but then why am I not thinking of Grandpa Wally's name? Grandpa Wally would be too weak to walk to the store and wouldn't want to do with it, so I would go shopping for him. Would have a list of what he wanted and everything. But we came back, and the door kind of one of them ones that shuts and it locks. There's no way to really unlock it. You have to turn the little thing to open the door anyway. But we couldn't get him to answer the door, and it was like we're banging on it, and we were like worried, but we heard him like moving around there, and like he barely got the door, and he was so incoherent, and like we couldn't understand what he was saying. And checked his sugar, and it was like 35 and like going lower and lower. So I said, I don't know, maybe he being older, his eyesight wasn't as good, maybe he took too much insulin or something. But that was a scary time. And of course I was with him. Everybody always talks about where they were when 9/11 happened. I was with my Grandpa Wally in the waiting room at one of his doctor appointments. We went there on bus, and they'd started turning on all the TVs, and we were watching this stuff unfold, and he had to go have his appointment. And then we got one of the last buses home before, because they shut down bus service in all major cities that day. And I can't remember if they opened them the next day or it was a couple days later or whatever it was, but we didn't know who was getting attacked. But yeah, that's always my answer to my "where were you on 9/11?" I was with my Grandpa Wally in the doctor's office. But like I said, Uncle Tim convinced him to move in with him, which I guess is better, because he has a car, he could take him places, him and his wife. But it was it became instantly like I had to sneak over to see my own grandpa, because he didn't want me there. And it wasn't just me, he didn't want anybody around him. He was so overprotective, or wanted all his attention, but that's why I was dreading talking about this, because I can't even talk right now. I'm so mad. I got to get to the end part of this when my grandpa Wally died, because I didn't know when my grandpa Wally died, and nobody else in the family did either. This was like 3 years. The last time I'd seen him was at my dad's funeral. Sad to say. Of course, you know, I was living in Indiana. He was living there, and like I said, I wasn't even allowed to go over and see him, my own grandpa, during the day, because he thought I was there for money. And I did go over for money sometimes, but it was my dad had sent him money to give to me. You know, he was trying to help me out by giving me some money. You know, he would give me $50 a month. You know, I didn't ask for it, but my dad would give it to him. And, you know, my grandpa would pay me, and then he would send my grandpa money in the mail, a check, because I didn't have a bank account. So, you know, and I had to sneak over for that, even though my grandpa wasn't losing any money out of it. And my grandpa had no problem with it. It was my freaking Uncle Tim. I don't even want to call him my uncle, because like I said, he told nobody when Grandpa Wally died. We didn't have a chance to go to a funeral. I found out from, I think, one of my cousins online that they seen it in the newspaper after he'd already had his funeral. And Uncle Tim's not still with us, but even if he was, I wouldn't have a problem saying this, but he was a piece of crap to do that to the family. You know, there were probably some people, like the ones that stole the VHS tapes that, and you know, I know some that have stolen money from Grandpa Wally, but I was never one of those. My sisters weren't. Other people, it's just, I'm gonna move on now, so I don't talk about this anymore. But it just makes me so mad. Like, anybody out there, don't do that to your family. Don't be so freaking, whatever your reasoning is, you know, because I could have had time with him before he died. I could have, you know, I guarantee, you know, if it had, I don't even know how he died. That's the thing, I don't even know how he died. I don't know if it was sudden. I don't know if he had time, if we could have went and said goodbye. But don't do that to your family. It was, you know, that man meant more to me than a lot of people on this earth. And I'm gonna stop recording for a few minutes here, gather myself. I'm gonna come back and talk about some Saturday morning cartoons. I'm sorry, guys. Alright, guys, now to compose myself. Sorry, I got a little emotional there just thinking about that whole situation, but I'm gonna try to move on, and we're gonna talk about what we're gonna talk about next, which was Saturday morning cartoon and Nickelodeon lineup. Well, a lot of times I just do the Nickelodeon lineup, but you know, sometimes I want to talk about Saturday morning cartoon, especially this week when I've spent a whole lot of time at the beginning talking about how special that was. So I'm going to look at a lineup. I chose a random day. It's going to be February 18th of 1995, and this is obviously Saturday, so we're going to be looking at the Saturday morning cartoons, and then a full 24 hours look at the Nickelodeon lineup. And of course, this is the time when Fox was on, you know, Fox Kids was on. And of course, everybody knows my thoughts on NBC's Saturday morning stuff. They started to gear it more towards teens, and I was 11 at this time. Didn't care about basketball, didn't care about the teen shows as much, so I was watching the other channels. We'll start with ABC, and this was I think this is before, this is before Disney bought ABC, or they merged, or however that goes. So, you know, this wasn't just all Disney stuff. In fact, you'll see some Disney stuff on CBS coming, but 8 o'clock we got Sonic the Hedgehog, classic cartoon. Jaleel White, who famously plays Urkel on Family Matters, does Sonic's voice. Then at 8:30 we got Free Willy, the cartoon. I've never really watched that. Then at 9, one of my favorites. It was in reruns, but still one of my favorites, Tales from the Crypt Keeper. You can see my smile on my face. I get to talk about Tales from the Crypt. Tales from the Crypt Keeper, of course, the cartoon series based on the Tales from the Crypt comic books, and the Crypt Keeper itself on this, and everything is based on the TV show. Just a kid-friendly version of it. You know, they make him green. They don't make him as scary looking. And the second and third seasons, they would bring on the old witch and the vault keeper from back in the comic book days as kind of his foils. You know, they're always battling to see who gets to actually host the show. Love that one. The next cartoon or show, I don't know what it is, called Reboot. I never watched that. And then we got Bump in the Night. I don't know what that is. Actually, I'm going to look that up real quick. Okay, Bump of the Night animated series. So it's a cartoon. American stop motion animated series. Yeah, I don't remember watching that. Maybe I'll look that up on YouTube and see if it's on there. And then 10:30, a show or cartoon called Fudge. Never heard of that. Then we'll move to CBS. I just talked about Disney before. Disney's The Little Mermaid. I remember watching that. I don't remember the series as much as the movie, obviously, but I've probably seen a couple episodes. Then at 8:30, we've got Beethoven, the series, because every movie ended up having a series. Speaking of that, 9 o'clock, Disney's Aladdin. I remember watching the series for that really well. And at 9:30, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the good old cartoon series that started in 1987, which I got the whole set on DVD now, which I'm really happy about. And then we've got an hour of Garfield and Friends, one of the all-time greatest cartoons. Loved the Garfield portion and the Friends, at the farm. Loved that. Then we got Wildcats, CATS. Never really watched that. Skeleton Warriors, I've never seen. Beakman's World, which I've talked about before. That and Bill Nye the Science Guy were science shows for some kids. My favorite was always Mr. Wizard on Nickelodeon, which I don't know if it'll be on here because it's a Saturday. I don't know if it'll be on the lineup, but it was typically on at 6 in the morning before we go to school. So I'd watch it when I lived with my granny, especially when I was in school there. I'd always watch Mr. Wizard. And then we got CBS Story Break, which is just like, I don't exactly remember, but I don't remember watching it. Fox, we start off with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. The episode was Mighty Morphin Mutants. Can't go wrong with Power Rangers. One of my all-time favorites. As you can tell, Mr. Gigantic Megazord back here. If I can point to it right. The original Megazord. This is 95, so they may have had the Thunder Zords out by then. I can't remember. When the second set of Zords. Then we got Where on Earth is Carmen Sandiego. Just watched an episode of this yesterday. I was watching haven't finished, but watching a 10-hour block of Fox Kids programming commercials from the 90s. And Where on Earth is Carmen Sandiego is on there. Of course, based on the computer game, and probably famous version of this is Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, the TV game show on PBS. Everybody watch that then. Then at 9 we got Animaniacs, Steven Spielberg produced crazy cartoon. Then we got it's Extravaganza, not Eek Extravaganza. Extravaganza. I never really got into that. I didn't really care for Eek or The Tick, which I see is coming up after Spider-Man on here. Spider-Man wasn't one of my favorites. I loved X-Men and Batman the Animated Series, but didn't care that as much for Spider-Man, and didn't like The Tick. Being X-Men, we got X-Men here. Episode is Out of the Past Part 2, so it was a two-parter. If you were watching last week, you got to tune in this week to see what happened. A lot of those would be like that, especially Batman the Animated Series. But I guess Batman the Animated Series had been over because now they're on the Adventures of Batman and Robin, which I didn't watch as much. And speaking of Part 2, Robin's Reckoning Part 2. I wasn't as big of a fan as I was for Batman the Animated Series. And then we got NBC with their stuff that I didn't really care for. Name Your Adventure, which isn't Choose Your Own Adventure. Was kind of like an anthology TV show series. Saved by the Bell of the New Class, which I didn't really like. California Dreams, which is just like a rip-off of Saved by the Bell. And NBA Inside stuff. So, I would say my favorite... I don't know if I could pick a favorite one on that, because there's a couple great ones on both lineups. I would say probably if I had to choose only one channel to watch that morning, it'd probably be CBS. You got Aladdin, Turtles, Garfield and Friends, But if you're watching cable and you're watching Nickelodeon, of course we start with at midnight with Nick at Night. And actually had a special on it this time. It wasn't even a show. It was called Brady, an American Chronicle. And of course later on I'll talk about why they were talking about the Brady Bunch, because the Brady Bunch movie had just come out. But obviously not the same actors or anything. But This was like a half-hour documentary on the Brady Bunch. Then we got The Adventures of Superman, The Lucy Show, one of my mom's favorites, F Troop, Mary Tyler Moore Show, Taxi, Bob Newhart Show, Dick Van Dyke Show, Dragnet, Adventures of Superman again, The Lucy Show again, F Troop. Then at 6 we start with Nickelodeon. Yeah, no Mr. Wizard, but we got the Little Bits, which I never really watched. 6:30 is Lassie, which could easily be on Nick at Night, and it has been on Nick at Night. Then at 7 in the morning we got the great Nickelodeon game show of all time, Nick Arcade. Man, what kid in the 90s didn't want to be on this game show? The Nickelodeon Wild Side Show. Oh, that's driving me crazy because I remember that, but I don't. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds crazy. I gotta look up, find out what it is again. It's a nature documentary series. Okay. So, I probably wasn't watching too much of that then. That's what I thought, like, maybe it was some kind of, like a variety show, but no, it was a nature documentary, but for kids. You know, for kids that loved animals, though, that was definitely a good show. Then at 8, one of the original Nicktoons, Doug, followed up by the original Nicktoon, Rugrats. Of course, Doug, Rugrats, and Ren and Stimpy were the first 3 Nicktoons. Then at 9, we get an hour of Muppet Babies. Yes, I have to sing it. You know the rules on here. 10 o'clock, we got Beetlejuice, the animated series. I actually love that, but I didn't care for the movies. The movie, and then I never even seen the new one they came out with. But I love the series. And at 10:30, Gumby. Oh, I love Gumby. Such a classic. Then at 11, The Alvin Show, which is just another nickname for the Alvin and the Chipmunks series. Love that one. Then we got Cartoon Kablooey, which was just like I thought the Wild Side Show was. It's just animated shorts, you know, all thrown together. Then we got something called Bing, the Sound of Something New. Never heard of that. Then My Brother and Me, didn't care for that one. Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon. Loved Looney Tunes, you can't go wrong. Then What Would You Do, the game show / variety show hosted by Mark Summers that I love so freaking much. Followed up by another great one, Wild and Crazy Kids. Those two always seem to go together. Can't talk. Then at 3 o'clock we've got an hour of Wienerville, hosted by Mark Wiener. The Variety Puppet Show. Gone Berserk. Welcome Freshman, didn't really care for that. Family Double Dare, probably the greatest version of Double Dare of all time. Love freaking Double Dare. And then Nickelodeon Guts. You got a lot of good game shows on this day. February 95, Nickelodeon was just, whoo, another level. Then we got Salute Your Shorts. Then we got You to You, which was like a, before I describe it, I want to look it up. Find out what this was. Focus on displaying viewer submitted what? Let me go to the page. Viewer submitted work and ideas in their Straight From You segment, where viewers are able to submit their work via mail, email, fax, or telephone. Oh, that's cool. Included short stories and comic strips written by viewers that turn into animated shorts. That would have been really cool. Now that I read that, I remember it. Because I remember thinking that would have been so cool to actually be able to send something like that in and have them animate it and bring it to life. At 6:30, though, we got Rocko's Modern Life, great Nicktoon, followed by another one, Real Monsters. Man, Nickelodeon was on fire this time. This is my time period at Nickelodeon, I'm telling you. Rugrats, and then I say that we got Snick now. Of course, Snick, the greatest. The Secret World of Alex Mack, which I was not the biggest fan of. Then we've got All That. The special guests were Malcolm Jamal Warner and Brandy. Of course, Malcolm Jamal Warner recently passed away, sadly. 9 o'clock, we got the Ren and Stimpy Show. And then at 9:30, my favorite Nickelodeon show of all time, Are You Afraid of the Dark? The Tale of the Ghastly Grunner. I remember that one. And then 10 o'clock, kids go to bed. You got to stay up an extra 2 hours. We got I Love Lucy and The Lucy Show and the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour. They put all 3 back to back. That's pretty cool. I'm sure if we were watching Snick then and that came on after, my mom was probably glued to the TV till midnight. But yeah, that's our lineups. And one final one I want to talk about is, of course, the TGIF lineup. Their big show at the time, you know, TGIF, if you don't know, It was from the 90s, obviously. Duh, why am I talking about it? No, but it was on ABC. It was their Friday night, just like Snick was the Saturday night Nickelodeon. It was the Friday night lineup for kids, preteens, teens, whatever you want to call it. But Family Matters was a big show at the time. Season 6, there were some big episodes in this one, including one where Urkel uses his transformation chamber to turn into like the Bruce Lee Urkel, where he's like karate fighting everybody. And then there was one, like a real poignant episode where Laura got robbed for her jacket, and the kids who did it got arrested, or teenagers. I don't know if they were kids or if teenagers or adults, whatever. They got arrested, and they threatened Laura that if she testified against them, that they would shoot her. So she decided she was going to go out and buy a gun, and then Steve finds out, and they try to talk her out of it, and just like, and then they have it at the end, like a PSA for, about gun violence and stuff, really poignant stuff there, but definitely stuff teenagers needed to know. The second show on there was probably my favorite season of Boy Meets World, or one of my two favorites, season 2. This was hadn't happened yet in the timeline of February, but Corey and Topanga would get together towards the end of the season, and this would be the one where they were in middle school, junior high, whatever you want to call it, and they went to Chubby's all the time, which they hadn't mentioned that in the first season. But one of the episodes that came on in February was the one where the famous one where Corey and Mr. Feeney ride the roller coaster, because everybody's claiming, oh, they're safe. Eric's taking Sean and his date out on a double date instead of taking Corey, and Mr. Turner's teasing Feeney about being safe and predictable. So Mr. Feeney and Corey decide they're going to show them, and they ride this roller coaster that they end up backwards on somehow when they get stopped. That was a great episode. Then there was one where Corey and Sean decided to do the school radio show, and they eventually turned into Lunchtime Lust, where there are people like telling secrets, and oh, this person likes this person, and they get in trouble by Feeney. And then one with Eric, and he gets this like beautiful tutor, and she likes him, so she's going to give him all the answers, but he's a moral dilemma. Do I take these answers so she'll like me and go out with me, or do I do the right thing and tell Mr. Feeney? Eventually he does the right thing. And then there was an episode where Sean starts to hang out with Harley, the bully, and his gang with Frankie and, oh geez, I can't think of the other guy's name. Frankie and Joey. Against Feeney and Mr. Turner's wishes. And of course this was before he moved in with Mr. Turner, and how important he came in Sean's life. But you can just tell I loved the season of Boy Meets World. Step by Step was in their 4th season. And in the final show, another one that don't get talked about nearly as much today that I loved, Hanging with Mr. Cooper. They were in their 3rd season. But this podcast is probably super long. I didn't even mean it to be, so I'm trying to move on here. We're talking about 3 movies that came out. Well, 2 movies that came out, sorry. One was Billy Madison, probably one of Adam Sandler's, I don't know if it was his first movie, but one of his first biggest ones. It's not one of my favorites of his. Certainly Happy Gilmore, The Water Boy, those are my, probably my 2 favorite Adam Sandler movies there. But Billy Madison was like his first big movie. I think he was in The Wedding Singer too. I can't remember what order that came out in. But the first movie that was really known as a Adam Sandler movie was Billy Madison. And then, like I talked about before, the Brady Bunch movie. They brought all new actors to play the Brady Bunch, and I don't remember too much about the movie. I just know my mom was excited for it because she loved the Brady Bunch, obviously, in the 70s. And a bit of sad news, Donald Pleasance, mostly known to horror fans as Dr. Loomis from the Halloween franchise, passed away. Man, he was iconic in that movie. He was like the one constant, obviously, other than Michael Myers. And if you don't count Halloween 3, which I count as a Halloween movie, but I'm saying, you don't count it, he was in the other ones too. I love Halloween 3. Everybody gives it crap because it's the 6 more days till Halloween, the one about the mask without Michael Myers. But I love that movie anyway. But anyway, Donald Pleasance is Dr. Loomis. Like, nobody else could have done that role. Nobody could have made Michael Myers seem as big of a threat as he did. Like, he made it seem like Michael Myers is going to destroy the earth or something. Like, he was so good at that role. talk a little bit about sports. Just like last week's episode was on February, this week's episode is on February, so Super Bowl had already happened, and the only football news of note is the Pro Bowl, which was obviously held after the week after the Super Bowl then, and it was always in Hawaii for like the longest time. The AFC beat the NFC 41-13, and the MVP was Marshall Faulk, who is the running back for the Colts at the time. This was before he went to the Rams and, became Super Bowl champion. It's still pretty good, but I think this is the last year he was there, and then they traded him, and the Colts ended up drafting Edgerrin James, which was another huge running back for him. And NASCAR news, Sterling Marlin won the big Daytona 500 race, and the other race for the month was the Goodwrench 500 at Rockingham, which Jeff Gordon won, and which is significant because this was the very first year Jeff Gordon won his first championship. My favorite NASCAR driver of all time, who's sadly retired now. I believe he's a team owner now. And, of course, one of my favorite things to talk about on here is kids' meal toys. As a lot of people call them Happy Meal toys because that's what they think of mostly, the McDonald's Happy Meal. McDonald's had one of those dual promotions when they would have toys for the quote, the boy toys and the girl toys, and I'm not trying to get all political correct on all that. It's just, that's definitely the way it was in the 90s. They would have boy toys and girl toys. And I'm sure there was girls that wanted the boys' toys and the boys that wanted the girls' toys. I'm not saying that, and they're like, you're not allowed to have them. It's just, that's the way they put it out, so that way, they both could get, toys that they wanted. Not just, all we got is Barbie dolls this month. Sorry, boys, if you don't want a Barbie doll, you don't get a toy. But, for the girls, they had the Polly Pocket wearable accessories. They were like, there was a ring, a locket, a watch, and a bracelet. I don't know if they had the Polly Pocket like open. It probably opened into like a little Polly Pocket, little mini Polly Pocket. Polly Pockets were already mini anyway. But for the boys, they had the Hot Wheels Attack Pack. That always seemed to be what they would do. They would always have like a doll. In this case, it was Polly Pocket, or cars for the boys. But it was like 4 different vehicles from Hot Wheels. Burger King had some pretty cool stuff. Gargoyles Defenders of the Night action figures based on the Gargoyles cartoon series, which is like really dark but really, really great kid, just like Batman the Animated Series. One of those dark cartoons from the 90s that, because grunge was like, music was like a big thing, and people were embracing like darker things. I'm not saying like devil worship and that type of stuff. I'm not saying people that like that. That was like, a darker, it started more of a darker image of cartoons and music and movies, and people really starting in, horror movies weren't like new then, or obviously the 80s, the slasher era, but, people starting to embrace the darker things, and I don't know, it's just the way it was. Gargoyles was a great cartoon. Wendy's had something called Techno Tows. They were like brightly covered vehicles, like, or colored vehicles. They're like tow trucks, I'm not exactly sure what they were. But Taco Bell had the Flintstones Stone Age Stampers. They were a set of 4 little mini vehicles with Flintstone characters on them, but there's also a bottom that came off, and they were ink stamps, which was always pretty cool. There's another thing about my grandpa Wally. He had, I forgot to tell this before, so I'm in a quick break here. He had a desk, and he had a ton of art supplies. Remember those markers that like make your head hurt because they stink so bad, but like the ones where you shake and it was like a little mini paint can almost. But there's markers and paints and pens and pencils and paper. He's like a kid's dream if you were into that stuff, and I love drawing at his desk. But he had an ink pad with a bunch of stamps, and later on I would end up learning in school how to actually like make my own initials using a rubber eraser, make my own stamp. And I would like, I've still got it. I'll have to show you guys sometimes, like, these songs I wrote at my grandpa's house when I was writing songs. They were poems because they had no music. But I would use my little stamp and put it at the bottom like, it's official, it's mine. I'll have to show you guys. Hopefully the ink's still on there from some of those. But these were Flintstone characters, like I said. They had Fred, Barney, Pebbles, and Dino. And then we're going to end up talking about a little bit of TV news. Big news for Seinfeld, like I just talked about Seinfeld earlier. They had their 100th show, and instead of doing like just a normal show, they actually did like a clips thing, and it ended up being a 2-parter. Of course, Seinfeld would end up having 180 episodes. It'd be like one of the biggest shows of all time. Really be the big that and Friends would be the big thing for the must-see TV, as they called it, Thursday nights. You know, you'd have Friends and this, and sometimes Frasier, Mad About You, and of course at 10 o'clock was ER. So I mean, NBC was like, and then later on that would be, you know, you would get Law and Order on Thursday nights. You know, that was the must-see TV was started. You know, Seinfeld was definitely a core show on that. But this clip show would actually, you know, the two-parter would actually become the first release they would do on home video. Of course, now they got all the DVDs out and you can stream them, and you know, home video ain't what it used to be, but you know, that's the way it is. But a show that was ending was Ghostwriter, and I alluded to this earlier, something I learned about it. But Ghostwriter was a show on PBS. It had 3 seasons for 74 episodes. And I never actually watched this at home because I didn't watch a lot of PBS, mainly because I was watching other stuff, or you know, Nickelodeon when I could watch it. But I'd first, like a lot of PBS shows, you know, like The Magic School Bus and Wishbone, I first encountered them by watching them at school. Like Ghostwriter was like the coolest thing ever. You know, if you don't know what it is, it's about a ghost. It's in this book, and it like will help these kids solve different mysteries and crimes and stuff. But they had an interview in 2010 with a producer and writer for the show. Now this is going to be kind of dark, speaking of dark things, but I don't know why this was never revealed, if it was too dark or just they canceled before they got to, but they actually revealed who Ghostwriter was, this writer and producer of the show. Ghostwriter was actually a runaway slave during the Civil War that helped teach other slaves how to read and write, and he was killed by slave catchers and their dogs. That's the dark part. But his spirit was kept in this book that the character Jamal opened in the first episode, letting him out, and you know, that's who Ghostwriter was. Like I said, kind of dark, the fact that he was, you know, was murdered, but a really fascinating story. If you actually like look back at all the episodes, you're like, yeah, I could actually see that, you know. And I don't, like I said, I don't know if they ever, maybe they would have gotten to his story, like one day opened the story about, well, whatever, you know, they didn't give him a name, but whatever Ghostwriter's actual name was killed. Maybe his story would be in there and the kids would figure it out. I don't know, but it would have been an interesting premise anyway. I have a feeling if they brought back Ghostwriter today, it would be all through text messages or stuff. It just wouldn't be the same. But I do want to thank you guys for watching. Sorry for the emotional breakdown in the long podcast, but it's my 50th episode. I've tried to keep them under an hour. Sometimes I ramble on too much. But I feel if I don't talk about this stuff too much, it's a wasted opportunity. Like, you know, some of the stuff, like, I might not get to touch on again. So, you know, talk about it as much as I can, you know. You guys don't have to watch the whole thing, or you can skip through. Maybe I should go back and put chapters in these so you guys know, like, what we're talking about in each one, you know, in case you want to skip something. You know, I don't care about music. I don't care about wrestling. I'll skip that. But if you do watch the whole thing or some of it, or just share it, you know, thank you. Like I said, 50 episodes, it's been crazy. I've only missed doing episodes on 2 weeks out of being sick. But hopefully that don't happen again, because I don't want to be sick. Not just I don't want to miss the episode, I don't want to be sick. But next week we're going to be episode 51. We're going to continue on. We're going back even further now. We're going to June of 1991. This is our 4th trip we're taking through 1991. I was 7 years old at the time and had just finished 1st grade, because back then, you know, around June 1st is the time school's letting out. Not now when it's like early May they're letting out. But yeah, June of 1991 is next week. Let me know if you got any comments, any suggestions, anything I should be doing, shouldn't be doing, what you like, what you don't like. Word of encouragement, get off YouTube, your video sucks, whatever you want to say. I don't care, you know. Opinions are opinions, you know. Everybody has a right to them. But next week, June 1991, we'll see you then.
And now, I predict the future. Next week, you'll be in the same time, same place, same station, for another hideous, hateful haul of horror.
Tales from the 90's never die. In our hearts they testify. VCRs and mixtape spins. Where